Hey, it's Toph, and welcome to part 2 of our time with Rupert Holmes. So on part 1, we tackled a lot of different topics, and on part 2 here, we will dig into the Adventure album track by track. So away we go here with part 2 of our episode with Rupert Holmes. Well, why don't we, spin the disc, okay?
You have to search through 1950s DJ terminology, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we got a little platter. We're going to send you away now. This is going out to Tony and Maria in Hop Hog.
Exactly.
This is for you.
Exactly. A 2 for Tuesday. Here we go.
Coming at you.
Out only 10 seconds, already number 3 on our Super Hit survey.
Yeah.
When the drum beats go like this.
You know, the album starts out very memorably with the title track and with this iconic keyboard riff, which kind of takes you through some twists and turns here on the opener to 1980s Adventure. All right, Rupert, where did that come from? That is just absurdly cool, that keyboard riff. And what were you playing that on too?
Okay. What's kind of interesting, I think, about this album, as opposed to virtually all my other albums, is, as I told you, I knew that I had to be able to perform this album live. Right. And normally I use a lot of orchestration, all of which I arrange myself. If any note you hear on one of my albums, I've written that note with a pencil and had it, This could not be the case. But I still wanted to get some of the colors and textures that I was used to on my albums, and that those people who knew my work from earlier albums would not say, well, this is all just like this, like 4 pieces on this album. So everything that you hear on this album that is not bass, drums, or Dean Balin's guitar is me playing what was at the time a very new synthesizer called a Prophet 10. And it was the kind of souped up version of a fairly new analog synthesizer that became standard called the Prophet 5. This was dual keyboards, and the serial number on my Prophet 10 was 0013. It was the 13th one made. Wow. And they had no manual. They hadn't written the manual yet. Yeah. And there were no presets. I had to invent every color with knobs and buttons and then save it to a kind of a tape medium, and I tried to find the analog synthesized equivalents of the kinds of timbres and colors and the heftiness of real orchestra. Yeah. And this opening, what I was trying to do in this song was basically started as if you were going to see the main title for an epic film.
Yeah, it's super theatric.
Yeah, very theatrical, very widescreen cinematic.
Yeah.
And my inspiration, seriously, and if you ever go back, you could probably go to YouTube and find it. A movie that changed my life when I was a kid, when I was like 12, because it was like the wildest thing I had ever seen on the screen, was called The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And it was a Ray Harryhausen stop animation film. So it had monsters like you'd never seen in a film. It had a cyclops. It had a two-headed bird. It had a dragon. It had a sword fight with a skeleton. It had all kinds of incredible visuals.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And the score was by the same guy, Bernard Herrmann, who did North by Northwest and Vertigo. And he did this main title that was sort of like North by Northwest goes to Arabia. And it was an amazing main title theme. And I tried to, it's not a steal from it, but it's an homage to the strangeness of those chord progressions that made me feel when I walked into the movie that I was about to go somewhere I had not been. In other words, I'd walked from a hot day in Pearl River, New York, into a movie theater, and suddenly I was in the midst of a complete fantasy world, and this was the music underneath it, and I was somewhere different. So I tried to give it this very epic cinematic feel, so that I could then make the point within the song that the real blockbuster adventures are us meeting someone for the first time that we didn't plan to meet that day.
Real life, yeah.
It's in a stranger's face, in the corners of an eye, and I made it kind of explode twice in the song, and then let it all die down as if all the fireworks were over and all the ashes settled to the ground. Yeah. And I ended the song by saying, just with acoustic guitar, those lines I mentioned to you before. And I stand in total awe at the simplest things that people say and do. I think true adventure lies in the ins and outs of those like me and you, trying to then bring it down to real people.
Yeah. Was there an element of, because I've always felt the other thing that's great about your work lyrically is sort of stripping out the phoniness that often goes along with whether it's show business or whether it's, a lot of the things that, record companies, all the things that, you were dealing with certainly at the time. But I've always connected, because I'm like one of those type of people where I just can't stand like the phony, sort of shallow approach to really anything anymore as I get older, and I feel like you're capturing that a lot, where it's sort of breaking through all the showy stuff and all the putting it on for people stuff and getting down to kind of the nuts and bolts of like what real people do and and I almost feel like that's a little bit of what Adventure's going towards, is you don't need all that stuff, all that, kind of surfacey stuff when you have just reality, because it's fun enough as is.
It's very much at the heart of it. I hope that I was getting that across. I was coming out of an era, and I produced some albums by some British art rock bands in the 70s before I did all this. And I was coming out of an era where people wrote songs that really would sing about the echoes of the smoke rings, of the distant visions, of the shadows, of the canyons, of the pitfalls of your mind.
Right.
And everything was black light and smoke. And
Rupert, you're speaking my language right now.
Yeah. Who were some of the bands? Because Nubs is a huge prog seven.
Well, I produced an album by Straubs called Deep Cuts. Do you remember Straubs?
Well, yeah, Rick Wakeman started in that band.
Yes. Straubs was very, very lot of Mellotron. I was playing a lot of Mellotron on that album. And there were other Sparks. Sparks was not that way, but
I love Sparks.
We're both big Sparks fans.
They were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun. They were very creative. But what I'm saying,
can I just do something really quick?
Yes.
So we close the episodes with the same thing we did for albums. We do for songs. Yeah. And I kid you not. So these are the 3 albums I did, for Round and Round.
Right.
I kid you not. Look at my 3 songs. Look at the second one.
Wow, Spark! Wow,
isn't that amazing? Wow. You mentioned,
yeah, that's amazing. That's truly amazing. Yeah,
they're a great duo.
And in the lyric writing department, Ron Mayle was like on his own planet. He was writing. He had a dictionary that none of us had ever met. He's just his own take on things that was so cryptic and clever. So yeah, I always found that it's why so many of my songs are situational songs. Because that takes it out of poetry and makes it into people. You don't need so it's not that I don't try to write poetically or choose my adjectives carefully or try to create images with my writing, but it's often about I have sometimes I try to just find what's extraordinary in the mundane. I have a song that begins, "You're browsing through a secondhand bookstore, and you see her in nonfiction, V through Y. She looks up from World War II, and then you catch her catching you, catching her eye. And you quickly turn away your wishful stare and take a sudden interest in your shoes. If you only had the courage, but you don't, she turns and leaves, and you both lose." Now, there's no that's not poetry. That's something that you can picture happening.
Yeah.
And it's something that could happen to you tomorrow as easily as it's happening to the person in the song.
Yeah.
And so that's what I always tried to reach for when I wasn't getting too full of trying to be, live up to being a pop star.
Sure.
And I tried to write about, just reduce things to, so what happened to you today?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's why so many connect. Do I have this right that the BBC used the keyboard intro to Adventure to was it to sign off every night or something?
I thought that was just happening in my hotel room in London, in my room. I thought that was a special thing they had arranged just for me. I thought, isn't that nice? So the British are so kind.
So the reason I ask is, I've gotten a lot of my friends in on this album, and I have a friend who now lives in England, and she was playing this record for somebody who was sort of like our age, and they're like, "Oh, that's BBC. That's what they play at I don't know, is like at midnight or something." And apparently that lick is like incredibly fit. Like everybody in the UK knows it. Whoever
it's kind of like I don't know if we had a show in New York, which the format of it appeared in lots of other cities. So it might have been in Detroit, but the format was called Eyewitness News. Yeah. And it was a certain kind, it was happy news. It was where all the newscasters joke with each other,
We had it. Yeah.
And they had this great jittery theme at the beginning. You could probably find it on YouTube anytime. And no one knew that what they were hearing was a scene from the movie, the underscore from a movie called Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. And there's a scene where they've got to get the chain gang's got to get it finished. And they did this, and everyone knows it as the Eyewitness News thing.
Yeah.
But it isn't it's actually something that was created for a completely different purpose.
Yeah.
But it sounded right in that context. So I've heard rumors that it is kind of a very, the opening lick of Adventure is pretty there. It's pretty, it's this, it builds to something that says, you're going to recognize me here now. And again, it was because I was trying to make you think, oh, this is a big movie. This is a big movie I'm about to see.
Yeah.
And then it turns out the big movie is really about you and what you're doing tomorrow.
I hope you got paid every time the BBC played that.
It's amazing the things I don't get paid for.
Rupert, the dynamics in the song are so powerful. Like on the podcast, we reference kind of the loud, quiet, loud thing in a variety of artists and a variety of genres. You mentioned that playing live was a huge part of the construction of this album. I love that you're kind of rocking out on this album. I can only imagine. Did you open shows on this tour with this song? And
yeah, absolutely. Because it sounds like it sounds like the music that the artist is going to walk out on. In other words, we would play this intro, and then as the music settles into a nicer riff where the vocal enters, then I would enter. I
do have to tell you, we mentioned that we listened to this one a lot as kids, and we had this thing where when we were out playing basketball in the driveway, or when we were playing football in the yard or whatever, whenever we would like kick the other one's ass or do something good, we would kind of parade around and go like that was like our like celebration song when we were like 7 years old.
That was your "We Are the Champions."
It was like right after like I'd like smoked nubs in driveway basketball or something.
Which never happened. I always won.
Well, I'm very honored that I was the entrance music for you. You know how every wrestler has his own entrance music, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Let's get to track 2, The Mask.
There are so many things to say. Could be true, could be me, could be you. Tell the mask. Oh, tell the mask.
Great guitar work on this one, both electric and acoustic. I do want to talk a bit about, and I think The Mask gives us a good opportunity, as the producer, pretty slick album here. I mean, were you kind of going into, especially when you compare it to the previous stuff, were you kind of going into it with a certain production approach or thought in mind as far as how you wanted this to sound?
I wanted the drums to really, I wanted you to really feel them. When drumming is the way I like it, rock drumming, LP drumming. I'm not talking about jazz drumming or anything else. It feels like the drummer's sort of, that your speakers are lined with really thick rubber and he's playing right on that rubber. And I wanted that every drum hit. I had a great drummer. His name is Benny Graham. Mm-hmm. He is the brother of Lou Graham, lead singer of Foreigner.
Foreigner, sure.
Yeah. And Benny was a fantastic drummer, and he was on the road, and I couldn't wait to get him in the studio. I had a terrific engineer named Michael DeLug, and Michael had a tendency to mic drums very close and put a lot of compression on them, which I happened to love growing up because the sound of AM radio to me was compression, where everything pumped. And I wanted to give most of the cuts that feeling. I was very lucky to have Michael DeLug, and there's a unity to the sound on the album. It all feels like the same studio, same engineer, same attitude, and that's because it was.
Yeah. It's a band. I mean, without question, it just sounds like a really cohesive unit and strong rhythm section. I think John Caruso should also be mentioned too.
John Caruso on bass was great. And I went back. John Caruso played bass when I was like he was a kid and I was a kid, and we were making records on the weekends at Scepter Records on 254 West 54th. This is back in like 1968. And to have him now in my band touring with me and for him to be the bass player on the album meant a lot to me just personally. I had two good lifelong friends, career-long friends in John Caruso and Dean Balin.
So if I can't wait to get to the next track, man, we got it. Let's do some Blackjack here.
Okay.
Track 3, Blackjack. Speaking of drumming, that's a pretty nice groove there.
Oh yeah.
I got my air drumming going over here.
I also love, I got to say, the on the single, the Nubs, I don't know if you've seen it. The artwork is this drawing of a jack of spades, but instead of the jack face, it's Rupert's face.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
I was marketing my own playing cards at that time as well. I sold them in the lobby during the concerts. No, not really. Yeah, that was a fun record to make, and you can hear all the band singing on that. That is not all Rupert Holmes singing harmony. That's Chrissy Faith, Phil Marshall, that's Dean Balin, that's Benny Graham, the drummer. Unlike so many of my other songs for albums, that was written knowing I felt that would work really good with a crowd.
Yeah.
I wrote it to be the easiest learn, meaning in other words, and I knew that with the chorus, when we started to repeat the chorus and had the rhythm drop out and just did the vocal, that it would be the easiest thing. All Chrissy would have to do is indicate to the audience, and we would have them. And it was a kind of way that I didn't write before, which was, that's going to be great to do live.
Yeah.
I never thought in those terms before.
It's a great breakdown at the end with the key change and then the sort of thumping bass that holds its note underneath. Yeah. That's a nice play. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, again, I let Chrissy go to town on the last chorus.
Yeah.
Chrissy Faith, knowing that when we did that in concert, 98% of the guys in the crowd were watching her anyway. So, I still get emails to this day, and people would say, when you were on Midnight Special, you had this redheaded singer. Nothing about me, nothing about my work, right? Dear Rupert, I saw you on Don Kirshner's rock concert. Who was the redhead? Is she still around? Where does she live?
Yeah,
and I passed them on to Chrissy, who still has a great singing career, and she's relocated to Italy right now, but she's still singing up a storm.
She's worked with a ton of artists. Yeah, when you look at her roster, it's really impressive.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and movies too, film. Yeah, and let me give you one credit that's really that no one knows about her is in the 80s I made a movie that was the first movie starring Demi Moore called No Small Affair. And Demi was supposed to be a rock singer, and what we recorded didn't come off sounding very good. And Chrissy had to come into the studio, fly into Warner Brothers, and dub all of Demi Moore's vocals in the movie. And she's doing all the singing in the movie for her. Never gets any credit for it. But
yeah. Were you thinking Blackjack was the lead single?
Yeah, I mean, I here's what I thought. I thought Morning Man was the lead single because I thought that Morning Man could build on the same people who had bought him.
Yeah.
Morning Man was, again, solo vocal by me in the verses, kind of not mellow, but a kind of mellow feel to it. Definitely what would be called a yacht rock feel now.
Right.
But then going into a kind of strong 4-part harmony, myself doing all the vocals, the way Him did. Him has this kind of moment where the lead singer, me, suddenly starts to assert that he's not going to let this situation continue. And he goes into this 4-part harmony that's very, it's very alpha. And this is where some of the love I had for Brian Wilson's records when I was in high school, just hearing somebody do a whole chorale, and it's all Brian Wilson basically, or Brian Wilson telling his brothers to sing a certain way. Right. So I thought Morning Man would be the right single to follow it. And it felt like I was being told that there was a drift towards adult AOR was the term that was used then. And I thought it was mellow, but I thought it could have an assertive chorus. Yeah. And it started to go up the adult contemporary charts. But again, it's easy to blame people. Maybe it just wasn't to be, but the label didn't know what to do. They had never worked the record Him. And so here I come in with Him the second, and they don't remember how they broke Him because they didn't really break Him. All else fails, Blackjack, because Blackjack was, for me, my Please Please Me. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. The Beatles had Love Me Do, and Brian Epstein was able, that was, I think, their first single that was, you may know something, you know more about this stuff than I do, but my impression was the very first single in England that the Beatles had out was Love Me Do.
Right.
Brian Epstein managed to force it onto the charts because England is such a small country that if he ordered 30,000 copies for his father's department store, that forced it artificially onto the charts. You can do that, So it charted, but it wasn't a top 10 record, I don't believe. I think it may have gone to something like 17. This is Love Me Do by the Beatles. Nice record, good record, still can listen to it, enjoy it. Very simple, very simple. And the next one was Please Please Me. And when I hear Please Please Me, I hear John Lennon saying, I am going to have a hit. If it kills you, I'm going to make sure there is not one moment in this record that is not a hook. Yeah. I am not going to leave one empty space in this record. And if it isn't, so the record is just, it's one hook after another. It's unrelenting. It will not be, it's da, 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 da. So we got the harmonica riff. Then we have the Kathy's Clown type vocal from Everly Brothers. They're doing, last night I said these words, last night I said these words, which is, that's alone is a hook.
My then the come-ons.
You know that, no, before you get to the come on, you got, you got the guitar like, da, 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 come on. Now you got the, come on. And
you're right. That's a hook assault.
Okay, and it just never lets up. Yeah. Well, I thought Blackjack was going to be sort of my version of that. I knew it would work with a live crowd, and I thought I'm going to like it if I can get this to chart because this is going to be fun to perform every night. I'm going to enjoy that. So it's got lots of hooks. It's got a lot of guitar work. It's got a great guitar solo by Dean Balin. It's got Chrissy coming at the end. It's got a modulation. And they just kind of lost it. I remember I did one talk show. Who was it? I was on some talk show. John Davidson, if you can believe that. Yeah, John Davidson had a talk show. And we had done this song about a month earlier. And I was now on it with a new single. And he said, what happened to Blackjack?
Yeah.
That was a hit single. How'd you lose that? And I remember Tom Snyder had the talk show that followed Johnny Carson.
The Tomorrow Show.
The Tonight Show, and he did the Tomorrow Show. Right. And somewhere out there on the internet, there's a video of me doing Blackjack with the band, this band.
Oh, really? Oh.
And we brought down the house, and it was the best live performance I ever did on TV. And when I sat down, he said to me, we had Elvis Costello on last week, and I think you just outdid him. And I thought, okay, so this has to be a hit. This has to be. But guess what? On Earth 2, which we're now living on, it was not a hit. On Earth 1, it was a hit. But unfortunately, we live on Earth 2 right now. So somewhere in a parallel universe, it was a hit.
Well, it's a hell of a song. Let's do track 4, The O'Brien Girl.
All I would ever need, what they say she's done is done. We're born to be.
When you were talking earlier about how the tour got you in really good vocal shape, I kind of thought of The O'Brien Girl. I think it's just a great vocal. And there are a lot of moments on this record where it seemed like, compared to your previous work, that you stretched yourself vocally. And that I think The O'Brien Girl is a good example of that.
I think the two strongest vocals probably are The O'Brien Girl and You'll Love Me Again, where I hit a couple notes that I do not have in me, and they just appeared out of nowhere. The O'Brien Girl, because I was trying to, one of the funny things that happens with me is that we're in an era now where people assume that a singer-songwriter, that every song that they write is a page torn from their diary, and that every song that they're singing is about them and really happened. It's the Taylor Swift thing, and so in other words, right. Here's a new album, we'll find out who her new boyfriends are or her new attitude is. And sometimes people don't understand that I play characters sometimes in these songs. And I've seen people say, what Rupert Holmes did in the Pina Colada song is shameful, and he and his wife should be ashamed of themselves. I'm thinking, do you really think I did that? So anyway, in the O'Brien Girl, I'm sort of back in high school in that song, and it was about most high schools would have kind of some student, and there was they just appear in the middle of the school year. And they seem to have some kind of mysterious story, and no one ever. People would say, "Where'd she come from? Where did he come from?" Mm-hmm. And it's the stuff that made the Shangri-La's record so good. Leader of the Pack, and I wanted to kind of convey that high school yearning that I remember feeling for. There was a girl in school, and she just appeared, and we all knew there was something secret about her life, and she wouldn't talk about where she'd come from and why she had just suddenly appeared in school and why her parents, and it made her all the more romantic and mysterious and haunting. Yeah. So I tried to put that into this song, tried to make it almost like a Phil Spector kind of production. Mm-hmm.
It's very swirly. The story and the song really pair together nicely the way you want it to.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, let's go from the swirly to a rocker here. Crowd Pleaser.
Yes.
This is the jam.
This is the jam.
Right?
This is it. Yeah.
It's very modern, Rupert. It's very, this song really holds up when you got that riff during the verses, that sort of, open picking riff underneath that vocal it's really, this is a song that really, really holds up.
I wanted to have it be, as far as that guitar riff underneath the vocal, I kind of wanted it to be Day Tripper on acid, although probably Day Tripper was on acid. But I wanted it to be like the next generation of a Day Tripper kind of guitar line. And as far as the song goes, I thought I've written so many story songs. I mean, that's what I do. Situational songs, story songs. And here I am knowing that this is going to be something I perform live with the band. Why don't I make the band the story?
Yeah.
Why don't I make the story about, why don't I play a lead singer with a band and the band, and it used to be his band, but then Stevie Nicks came in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like Fleetwood Mac had this band and then suddenly it was the Stevie Nicks band. Yeah. And when each member of the band is introduced, you know who gets the most applause. Chrissy's up there on stage, and anytime I let her rock out, she steals the show. I'm really good with that because I'm not gonna be rocking out that much, right? Right? And I'm kind of enjoying also the break. I can sit at the piano and I can bang the chords out and and have a glass of water. So I thought, well, let me make it about a lead singer, a female singer, comes into the band and sort of becomes the whole center of attention. And the guy can say, "This used to be my show." I guess I'm like,
right.
I always make the joke. People say, "Do you perform?" I say, "I play in a Rupert Holmes tribute band,
Right.
and I play bass."
Yeah.
And they and they like me because I know the chords. So
Right,
I thought that would be good. I can actually stage Chrissy upstaging me and make it part of a song. So she was very inspirational to that, and she just does a great job on it.
That's cool.
Rupert, I love the chorus on this. You just mentioned kind of the rhythmic aspect with those 8 notes. Is this one where the verse led to the chorus, or did the chorus lead to the verse? Because to me, the song really builds towards the chorus. So is that something you started with and you said, how can I shape around this? Or was it vice versa?
It's most of the time, I hope this is the truth. I think it's the truth. I'd say in the majority of the song, with the majority of the songs I write, the verse comes first because the chorus has to be the ultimate outcome of what's happened in the verse. And until I have the verse, I don't know what that outcome can be. I think that on Blackjack and maybe on this, the chorus came first. But I knew I had to have the chorus is, it's funny because Crowd Pleaser has a big, powerful chorus. And then the verse, when you go to the verse on it each time, it's like it's a pullback emotionally because the guy's suffering. He says, she sings the best, this is the worst. It's like, and I'm going to have to quit the band. This was my band, and I'm going to have to quit. I just can't take it. And also, by the way, it's about another theme that runs through my work. And again, this is, to me, trying to relate it to real life situations. I've written a lot of times about people who are in situations where they are in love with someone, they may have a romance with that person, and then it ends, but they're still in love with them, and they have to continue to work with them alongside them every day. I wrote a song called Business as Usual about a guy who's, the woman he's involved with breaks up with him, but they're both working for the same company, and they have to keep attending meetings together. And she keeps sending him memos, and they're not love letters, and it's torture. And yet he has to keep the job because that's the job he's got. And that's sort of in Crowd Pleaser. He's thinking, I loved her, and now she belongs to everybody, not me. And what am I going to do? Am I along for the ride? Am I just going to carry her bags? So the verses are heartbreak. The chorus is anguish and her triumph. So I think in this case, the chorus did come first.
Well, a good lead in, I think, lyrically to this next one, which I can't wait to talk about. This is the beginning of side 2, track 6, You'll Love Me Again.
You love me once, you'll love me again. I truly believe that you'll stay away.
So Nubs can attest to this. This is certainly my favorite song on the album. I think this is just one hell of a song, Rupert. It's the power of it, right? And the vocals, the lyrics are really interesting too, because there's this idea that this guy is a little heartbroken, but there's also this you talked earlier about this confidence. It's sort of, there's almost a little bit of a you'll be back thing here that is really cool. And if there's a hopefulness to it, in addition to being boy, you left me, that sucks, but listen, you'll get it. You'll wake up one day and the light bulb will go back on and all. I mean, so, but really musically, it's very unique in that kind of, hitting, ringing out chorus, lots of space. The vocal is super good. I mean, you're obviously hitting some good range there, but man, I think it's a beautiful song. It's my favorite on the record.
Oh, well, thank you. It was an unusual song for me to write because my characters in my songs are more likely to be uncertain, or I write a lot about characters who think they know what's going on, and then you'll find a song coming up called Cold, where the where the narrator is very sure of himself at the beginning of the song. Right. And in the course of the song, he realizes he's completely misunderstood what this woman and probably all women are about. And he ends the song I always feel I've done a good job if my vocalist, my vocalist, listen to me, I'm the vocalist. If my character, if my protagonist, if my protagonist is somewhere different at the end of the song than they were at the beginning. Right. I don't like songs where you just stay stagnant, where it strikes a note of we're going to party all night, and at the end you're saying we're still going to party all night. Right. I like there to be some kind of progression. Yeah. So normally my protagonists, I hate to say heroes, are either full of self-doubt or not full of self-doubt and get the rug pulled out from underneath them. Yeah. As is sort of the case with the guy in the Pina Colada song, where he's sitting there saying, I was tired of my lady. He's all full of himself. I need something new. Right. And in the end, he realizes that she's the one who placed the ad. She was more tired of him than he was tired of her. And he learns a lesson from it. In this case, I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. And there is something, there's something, it can turn into obsessive, and it can turn into something maybe not healthy. Right. But there is something we still admire about someone who will not be stopped. Yeah. Someone who said, there's something about a guy who says, now that guy can turn out to be a stalker, but I don't think that's the case here. No. I think this is just somebody saying, yep, you think we're over. Yeah. And I will walk the Sahara barefoot and bring you ice water to quench your thirst. There is nothing and by the way, I know that I'm going to succeed. And there's just something, it was fun for once to actually say, this should be a down song. This should be a sad song. This should be the somebody done somebody wrong song. Yeah. And instead it's no. This is it's all about the guy saying, no, I can see, I have a vision, I can see it, I'm progressing towards it. Yeah. And someday, my mother was British. My mother was British, and she brought me up. She raised me to believe that the American Revolution was a diplomatic blunder by George Washington. That was her point of view on it. The British always think that we're someday going to realize what an error we made and we're going to come back, And there's something wonderfully single-minded about that. So I'm actually very, very glad that you like this song. I really am. And the kind of forthrightness that the song declares meant that I had to sing it that way. Yeah. And I had to hit notes that I don't actually have some of those notes in my range. I never did. Yeah. And when I was done, but for the period of time that I was recording this, and there's no we didn't have electronic doctoring at that time. So I just had to hit these notes, and it was sheer willpower. Well, there's one where I go, and I jump like 2 octaves or something, and it's coming from a very low note. And so it's like a jump of maybe a 16th or something like that. That's a real
apex of the song. I mean, when you're saying you'll wake one night and it just, things are just really building further up, and I mean, it's a real apex of the tune, both lyrically, and it captures the story and the music so well. Wonderful song there on track 6. Let's go to track 7, the one you mentioned briefly, Cold.
I'm burning for you, although it feels like 20 below.
So this basically clean tone, maybe a little overdrive on her guitar solo that takes it out the last couple minute and a half, is probably the coolest part, I would say, of Cold. That's like David Gilmour type guitar work there. Really, really nice, kind of bluesy, funky over that really cool beat. It's a good song leading up to it, but I think that last minute and a half with the guitar work is really the highlight.
Yeah, well, that's definitely me wanting Dean to have like a stage for himself. The riff is played by Benny, and the bass is a real nice tattoo underneath it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to let him have his. I would have liked it if the whole second side had just been his solo, just going all the way, for another 25 minutes. But it's actually a favorite song of mine. I like the harmonies, especially at the end. I sing some really sick harmonies with myself that I couldn't. I knew on paper the harmonies would work interestingly, but they were so strangely dissonant that I had to record each part not hearing the other harmony, because if I tried to sing with the other voices, I'd say, no, that can't be the right note.
Yeah.
But once I sang them as if they were, and I had to actually notate, even though I don't need to because I've got it in my head, I had to actually notate the harmony part for myself and play it more as if I were playing an instrument rather than singing it, because it was just the harmony notes made no sense against the chords, but I knew that they would sound eerie. Main thing I was trying to do was get a very shivery sound from the outset. And I really think it's successful that way. I like the arc in that song a lot.
Let's get to a favorite here for sure, and one that you touched on earlier in Morning Man.
And the night begins to clear. Morning man, doesn't take much to wake me, just to shake your morning man.
It's kind of it's a little bit more obscure as far as a layer is concerned. This album just has great layering. I love that little acoustic strum during the choruses. I think that's important. It's because it kind of keeps that, obviously the groove of this and the just kind of overall feel of this is important. But I always notice that little faint acoustic strum in that.
What's funny too is you hear that, and what totally stands out to me is that those low synth notes during the chorus is what totally stands out to me.
Yeah.
So it's funny that we both pick out totally different things.
Yeah.
Well, it's they're both interesting observations. The acoustic, it's kind of interesting. If you think about the record Hymn, the verses of Hymn are all that nice open acoustic.
Right.
And then when you get into the chorus, the acoustic becomes less important to the feel. So the part of Hymn that goes over by the window is all bass line, this pumping bass line, and Dean's very good strum by Dean. In this one, I was going with the bass line in the verses that Nubs is referring to. And in the chorus, I wanted to kind of bring in that open strum, just that you could feel it against this thick harmony, this very thick harmony that I was doing.
Right.
So there's a little bit of both. And that's interesting, Nubs, that you talk about whether it's whenever I played keyboard, and by the way, I said that I played the whole album on Prophet 10, but I also played acoustic piano and electric piano and other instruments like that. But I also love having my left hand playing a different riff on a different keyboard than my right hand. And so on The Mask, for example, you've got this sound that sounds like a bass clarinet, and it's a square wave on an old Korg's version of a Moog, the Korg M1, and I'm playing the boom, boom, boom. So I have the left hand on The Mask being played by the Korg just alone, a monophonic instrument, and then the right is on the Prophet. On this, the left hand bass you referenced is me on Prophet, but it's also being doubled by Dean on guitar. But he's not playing it as if he's a guitar player. He's playing it as if he's part of the synth package.
It's like a Paul mute kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's got the attack of a guitar pick,
right?
But it's got the actual color of it is more of a keyboard sound. So that was all. We all worked out that boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. It's very syncopated bass line. Yeah.
And that's what that compression you talked about earlier, all that effect can really make just a single guitar pick note like that complement
it's one big squash.
Yeah.
And it's and I love it. I love it. A lot of people, purists wouldn't like it, but I love it.
That's what stands out to me, not just about Morning Man, but about the album. And Toph, you mentioned it earlier. There's so many elements of this that hold up musically, just in terms of like sonically what the band was doing. That's a great example. I mean, you're talking about, some vintage instruments, but it sounds just as fresh and good in 2020 as it did in 1980. And think about how many albums of the 80s sound really dated. The drum sound is muddy and synthesizers sound cheesy. This is not that. I mean, Morning Man sounds really fresh and really sonically something very cohesive.
Well, it's kind of, here's the thing. I think my approach to synthesizers was always different from other keyboard artists because my instrument is really orchestra. I'm an okay piano player. I played piano on all my albums, but I always kind of consider myself a rhythm piano player, the way there's a rhythm guitar, and my acoustic piano is the piano you hear on Escape the Pina Colada Song or anything I do. But having written a lot for real instruments, real strings, real woodwinds, real brass, I couldn't stand the cheesy sounds of synths that were supposed to sound like those instruments. And I felt that I would either, from the palette of colors that I could get on a synthesizer in 1980, I tried to choose either the sounds that could evoke the real instruments I might have chosen, but weren't trying hard to be those instruments, or even better, I would invent instruments in my patches, which is the term for a setting on a synthesizer. The patches I created would be like no instrument you'd ever heard, including all the synth-heavy albums that you'd heard in the past. I would try to find something where you thought, I don't even know if that's a synth. And sometimes I would blend, as I just mentioned, I would have Dean double something with me, or even triple something with me. And so because the sounds were never of a period, I think they've held up pretty well because they don't evoke Jump or any of the other synth-heavy records of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Rupert, am I right to think that this song is about a good old-fashioned morning shtup?
It's about it's about the situation of a couple whose lives aren't, their work shifts are not the same. A lot of DJs at that time were a DJ, they'd say, this is our morning man on a radio station. I must have talked to every DJ at every radio station in America during the time of the Pina Colada Song. And there was always can you go on the air at 6:30? Why? Well, it's morning drive. He's the morning man.
Right.
So I started thinking about all these morning men and sometimes morning women on the air. And I thought their schedule simply cannot work with someone they know who works other hours. And what if they know someone who works a night shift? They might only see each other as one of them is coming in from work and the other is getting ready to go to work.
Yeah.
They might have to. And so their whole life might hover around 1 hour when I always pictured the woman in the song being a nurse coming off the night shift.
Yeah.
And she's working the midnight grind. And it's just that their romance is still continuing. They're living in the same apartment, but they're never seeing each other. And they're leaving notes for each other all the time. I did this, I took that, I'm going out, da-da-da. And they're in this romantic relationship without ever having contact, except for this golden hour when she might come to bed and he has to go out of bed. And maybe if he can afford to be a little late and she can afford to get home just a little bit early, maybe there's some way they can have their bliss even within the context of punching a clock. Yeah, I know it's sappy, but it's something that happens. People sometimes have to make things like that work for them. Yeah. If there's such a thing as afternoon delight, this is a morning metaphysics, I don't.
Yeah. Well, it's and yet another great example of the story and the concept really blending perfectly with the music. That's part of what I love about Adventure is it all works. It's all, and that's, I think, where theatricness of things that we've talked about before and all your other work tied to theater and tied to television, all these things. It's not just what lyrics can I slap over this to kind of make it work. It really does all work together. It's all very integrated, and in Morning Man, another good example of that. Did this get some radio play? Did this perform okay as a single for you?
It almost looked like it was going to be a hit. Yeah. I think I believe on the adult, at that time, the adult contemporary charts were actually meaning something. Right. Some people thought that was where top 40, the top 40 would go away and that AC would take over. And instead, a lot of different things happened. And remember, of course, that music videos still had not really arrived at this point. Yeah. This is just, I think I did a video of and by the way, when you did a music video in those days, it had like a budget of $3,000.
Right.
And someone said, I think we should shoot it in a warehouse. And you say, you mean like every other music video? Because you can, yeah, I know a warehouse that no one will complain that we do. So,
Right.
So there was, that took music in another direction. But Morning Man did, I thought I saw something where it was at least top 20 on the AC, maybe even top 10 for 1 week or something. And it did pretty good in England, I think, too. I was happy with it. But again, we really felt, everyone involved in the record felt like there was a hit here to be had, and they just kind of lost it.
Yeah. Well, it should have been. Hell of a song. Let's get to track 9, I Don't Need You.
If you'll just come by today, so that I can have you near forever, while I say that I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need you.
There's a lot of that fuzz guitar, you see it earlier, I think in Crowd Pleaser, but another good guitar song on this record. And obviously I think you touched on it earlier. It's kind of a fun tune. It's it's irony of the bouncy, snappy, catchy music with the, with the lyrics coming over the top of it is pretty vintage Rupert, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, early in my career, I really admired the records that Gilbert O'Sullivan would make, because sometimes he could have a very bouncy song, and if you on the fifth listening, you'd realize it's actually a pretty sad song.
Yeah.
Or it's a plucky song where he's trying to stay optimistic. In a way, this song, first of all, this is an incredibly simple song. It's an incredibly simple chart. Very straightforward. It's one of the songs I still to this day love to perform. I really enjoy it because it gets a laugh of recognition from people where I say, losing weight and losing sleep and losing my mind fast. Stop. I don't. And I slap myself in the face at that point. And also, I forgot your number 636-4831 and I don't need you. And it's a human condition. And it's sort of the inverse of You'll Love Me Again.
And Morning Man.
And Morning Man.
It's great because Morning Man is I need you, right? Like we're on these differing work schedules and I really need you. And then the next song is get the hell out of here. I don't need you.
Well, I've always felt of all of Aesop's fables, the tortoise and the hare and all those, I've always felt the fox and the grapes was he didn't go into as much detail as I would have liked. Sour grapes, the phrase sour grapes comes from a fox that wants to get some grapes and then he finds he can't get them. So he says, well, they probably would have been sour anyway.
Right.
And that's how we go through life. Like, oh, well, I probably wouldn't have liked her anyway.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have loved him. And we're always doing that. And the truth is that, when people say, I just want her to, own up to the fact that she has issues of sharing, and that's all I really want for closure. And I turn to the guy and I'll say, no, you wanted to say, I want you back, and can we please get back again? So this was kind of a straightforward song. I always admired songwriters like Roger Miller and Gilbert O'Sullivan, who could write a real lighthearted song, and it could be catchy, and yet there was a little bit of humanity in it as well. Yeah. And also, by the way, if you can get a laugh, that doesn't hurt. So as I wrote this again, I thought, this will be fun to perform. I'll like performing this for an audience. So.
We did a early episode about Phil Collins of his Face Value record, back same year, I think 1980, right? And we touched on that. It was, the artist who can come up with this catchy, poppy, memorable music, but then layer this story that when you read the lyrics, it's like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. He
Absolutely.
did that a lot. And I think, it's a great example of that. But to make the whole package work is something that's pretty cool. And I think a lot of people who don't key in on either the sort of deeper lyrical content or, don't necessarily piece it together with this dichotomy of bouncy music with this sometimes like dark, like whoa kind of lyrical content. It can be very cool when you get that working together.
Yeah. Who it was Regis and Kathy Lee. Who replaced Kathy Lee with Regis Philbin? what's her name? Another King.
Kelly Ripa.
Kelly Ripa. So a year ago, Kelly Ripa suddenly goes on a tear. Someone says, you got to turn on TV. And she's explaining to the audience what the Pina Colada, what the story of the Pina Colada song actually is. Like, after 40 years, she's just finding out now what it's about. Yes. And you know, they're the people who are only now discovering that I'll Be Watching You by Sting is actually a very menacing song.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
It's definitely the serial killer or stalker song, you know.
Right.
So there's something fun. It's something interesting when people don't fully realize what a song. I heard Delilah for years and never realized the lyric is dreadful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So quite a story.
That's great that it's one you still like to perform. Let's close it up here with Special Thanks.
Timeless thanks. Special thanks.
Again, layers, just layer.
The vocal texture.
Love that about the record. It's great that it closes in that fashion, and Special Thanks is a real kind of neat way to wrap it up. You know, it's a very nice, closing to this record.
Rupert, I kind of hear this, I'm Not in Love by 10cc, where you got those, where the background vocals are really instruments. That's what I think of when I hear Special Thanks. I don't know if that was intentional at all, but I'm making that connection.
The connection is perfectly made. I was not striving to create the I'm Not in Love sound, which was an amazing sound. But what I was trying to get, what I did there was I wanted it to sound like a choir. So what I did is I wrote a 4-part chorale. That's when you study classical music. There's a way you write a 4-part chorale for soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone, and you write there's certain voicings that you're supposed to use. I wrote a 4-part chorale as the backup, rather than trying to say, well, sing harmony to my melody. I just wrote these cushions of chords, and then what I did, instead of having Chrissy sing the soprano part and Dean sing the alto part, and I had them each sing each line as in unison and double track it, so that we ended up having like 10 vocalists on 4 vocal lines, so that you had basically a 40-piece choir singing at the same time. And even where they go from ah and to ooh was done almost, it felt like those old high school concerts that I used to go to, where there'd be someone conducting the high school choir, and they'd always indicate, no, very quiet and all like that. So you're hearing the whole band form the tapestry for my Special Thanks. And it always seemed like every album that ever came out always ended up with a credit saying special thanks to, and it would always say something like so-and-so for the great coffee, and so-and-so for the back rubs and all like that. And I thought maybe I should, instead of putting that on the back cover of the album, write a song that is my special thanks to absolutely everyone who has made this life that I've been living, where I'm doing exactly what I always hoped to do, possible. Because I even then, and at that time, I didn't know I was going to be writing Broadway shows and novels and things like that. But I thought, what I'm doing for a living, I would do for free. And I would even pay them to let me do this. And the trick was, one, not to let them know that, or they wouldn't pay me. But I thought, I really am a lucky son of a gun. And I thought I should write a little bit of a hymn here saying, thank you.
Well, I thought it was cool too, because in the liner notes of the album, you have a really kind of touching little tribute to your listeners. I don't know if you even recall this being part of the insert, but you kind of say, if you're reading this and you bought the album, thank you, and I can't do this without you, and write me here and I'll write you back if it's coherent. It's just a very cool, not a lot of artists that were at your stature at the time would have done something so genuine and connectable. I thought that was very cool. It's a nice touch.
I just always remember when I would perform, I would meet people after the show, and some of them had been listening to my albums for years, because really I started in 1974. I didn't have a number 1 record. I didn't have a top 10 record until 1979, 1980, the very last week of the 70s. People would show up after my shows and say, well, I had this, and they'd hold up my albums, 5 albums back, 6 albums back. And I think you were there all, you've been listening to this. I still get letters all the time from people who say, I've been listening to your music for the last 40 years, and thank you for, I write back to them and say, the fact that you've let me be the interior decorating for your life, one wall of your house, and it means a great deal to me. And by the way, a lot of people took me up on it and wrote to me, and it meant a lot to write back to them. So.
Well, allow us to be sincere, and this is going to be super lame, but I want to give you special thanks for taking us through that album, because, it is one that, as you can tell, we've dug into quite a bit, and to get your take and get your recollections and all that on it is really, really cool for us. And you've taken so much time to hang out with us and help our little podcast here, and we're just incredibly thankful for that. We usually close by we actually give a little bit of a rating on the album we're reviewing, where we either say it's on the turntable, it's in the collection, it's collecting dust, or it's in the for sale bin, right? And I'll just save everyone a lot of time. This one's on the turntable.
It's on the turntable. Absolutely. And will remain on the turntable.
Yeah. Of course, the fact that I'm here kind of forces your hand. It's a lot easier to say. But,
it's a bit easier, but we would have gone with it anyway. It's a great record. Rupert.
And are you guys, and you guys are truly twins, but obviously not identical twins.
We actually are identical, believe it or not.
We are. Yeah.
You are? Oh, well, yeah. Then the beard does so much different. I was thinking that you didn't look alike, but you are identical twins.
This is my COVID beard right here,
Oh,
actually, I grew it in honor of this episode just yesterday.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. This is my COVID beard too, don't you?
Yeah, this took me, how long has it been? 6 months. So
yeah. Rupert, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it. This has been a huge thrill.
It was actually a lot of fun for me. Thank you for living so deep in these tunes and the Adventure album. And by the way, for the first time in a long time, you can actually buy the album. You can get it at both. It's been reissued as for download at Amazon and iTunes, and it's also on Pandora and all the other services. And that wasn't true about 3 years ago. So
I think it was even more recent. I checked like a year ago on Amazon, and it was like, why isn't this on here? And then all of a sudden it appeared. I was very happy about that.
Well, Universal Music Group sort of got it together and realized that there were enough people asking for it. So that turned out good. You have a wonderful show, and I was actually really enjoyed myself tremendously being on it.
Well, thanks, we appreciate it very much. And it was really great to hang out and hear more about this wonderful record. And perhaps our paths will cross someday, but thank you for this recording, and thanks for all you've done for the arts and for your multifaceted career. And we'll keep cheering you on from up here in Michigan.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot.
Nubs, let's get in a quick in your head before we close it up.
In your head.
Nubs, what is in your head, sir?
Right. Well, you know what? We haven't done a Michael McDonald reference for a while, so let's just go with a little Doobie Brothers taking it to the streets, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You don't know me 'cause I'm your brother. Listen, I don't know if this was intentional, but you know that on the old podcast here, you can't throw out Mr. McDonald without being ready to back it up.
Well, you know during the pandemic how much I've been working on my McDonald.
Yeah,
so
well,
let's just go ahead and showcase it.
I mean, if you're gonna take us there,
yeah.
All right, you ready?
Are these actual old Michael McDonald tapes?
Okay, here it comes. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. You don't know me, but I'm your brother. I was raised here in living hell. You don't know my kind in your world. Fairly soon the time will tell.
Sing it, Michael. Sing it.
You're telling me all the things you're gonna do for me. And I ain't blind, but I still don't know what I think I see. the street.
To the
Streets.
We'll leave a message from my brother. Oh, you
Thank you. Next in my head is something completely different, which is Fallen to Sleep by Mudvayne off the Lost and Found album. And then kind of a should have been bigger Moby hit, We Are All Made of Stars off of the 18 album. T, what is in your head?
I'm kind of glad that we didn't subject Rupert Holmes to our singing performance.
Oh, he would have signed off immediately.
Yeah, I feel like he would have been outski. I referenced this during the episode when we had Rupert, but Sparks is a band that he mentioned and I've mentioned before. And this is a song called Tryouts for the Human Race, which was during Sparks has had all these different eras. It's one of those bands that, has kind of tried a little bit of everything. This was when they were going through kind of a disco synth type phase. A great track there. The second is the band Rush, which we focused on 2 episodes ago. And their song Red Barchetta, which obviously is just, you kind of rotate through some of your top 10 favorite Rush songs, but wonderful jam there from those guys. Song about a car, as Geddy Lee says it. And the third is by the Commodores, and it's called Slippery When Wet. Just a little funk jam from those guys, one of Lionel's early ones. And that is what is in my head.
Feature one of Lionel's best ow.
I think, yeah, he's got
a pretty good one.
A few pretty good owls on that one. Hey, special thanks, again, no pun intended, to Rupert Holmes. Having him join the podcast was awesome. And hope you all enjoyed our discussion on Rupert Holmes' adventure. Nubs, anything in closing?
Oh, nothing. Just, got to hang out for a while with a dude with a #1 hit record. Just another day at the office. No big deal.
Just another day on the old podcast here. Well, we will see you again soon for our next episode, but certainly episode 17, one for the books, here on Two Twins and an album.
Two twins. Well, that's about it. That's all we have. I hope it wasn't too disappointing. We will see you on tour. Until then, take it easy.